For the latest in Nigeria, vote counting is still continuing after yesterday's tightly contested election. Technical glitches and delays were reported at some polling stations. 18 candidates are vying for the position of president, but only 3 of them are considered top contenders in the race. At least 93 million people were registered to vote in Africa's most populous nation. They're hoping the new leader will deal with the failing economy and growing levels of poverty, amongst other issues. The final results are expected in the next 5 days. For more on the developments in Nigeria, I'm joined by Chioma Agwuegbo, who's the Executive Director at TechHerNG. A very good afternoon to you. Thank you so much for your time. It really has been a historically tight election, vote counting underway as you and I speak. Talk to us about some of the observations you've made during this election.
Thank you very much. I think the first thing to say is that we had a lot of expectations from the Independent National Electoral Commission, but unfortunately it seems like they have been the weakest link as far as these elections are concerned. And this is because it doesn't make sense to a lot of us Nigerians how you have one job to do every 4 years, which is conduct elections, conduct members and staff of the Independent National Electoral Commission, ensure that citizens have trust and have hope and have confidence in the votes that they cast. But the problems that we've heard of yesterday across the country are the same problems we've had in the last 4 years and in the 4 years before it. And so there's a lot of questions about what is INEC doing with all the money that it receives? What has INEC done with all of the time that it's had to prepare for these elections? We've had issues, simple logistical issues. For instance, sensitive polling materials did not get to polling units on time. Why is that happening in 2023? We had incidents where INEC officials got to the polling units and didn't have ink for people to use to thumbprint. So it's not like it's the big issues. It's the really little things that end up, just jeopardizing the entire process. And so these are my first thoughts. Of course, we can't begin to talk about the violence, just the extreme violence that we've seen in various parts of the country where thugs have been allowed to come into polling units, in some instances burnt the entire ballot sheets. And so you have to ask the question, why do we keep having these problems every 4 years? Why is there no investment in ensuring that people can cast their votes and those votes count?
The reports of violence are ones that we've heard to be very minor in the bigger scheme of things, but still significant, especially looking at the impact of these elections and, of course, the competitive nature of these elections, really, really crucial in charting a way forward for Nigeria in its entirety. Why do you think, of course, looking at those aspects and the challenges that have been encountered, that sufficient measures haven't been put in place to tackle that? I mean, we were hearing, of course, in the build-up to elections that police and security is going to be very tight.
First of all, can I correct an impression? You talked about minor violence.
Yes.
If you looked at the headlines from Nigeria today, you would see that a pregnant woman was killed. You would also see that a young woman went to vote and she was stabbed in the head with a bottle. As a matter of fact, her story is currently making the rounds because she went, got her head cleaned and treated, and went back to her polling unit. So I refuse the tag minor violence. There are actual lives involved. People have been hurt. As a matter of fact, there have been some INEC officials who were tampering with ballot papers who got beaten at those polling units. There's even reports yet to be confirmed that one of these INEC officials or one of these people working with INEC at a polling unit was killed because people just got really offended that while they made them wait for so long, they had officials hidden inside a room thumbprinting on ballot sheets. So, just wanted to disabuse your mind from the, it's not minor violence. People are actually getting hurt. People have been beaten. People have been dispossessed of their belongings by thugs who have invaded these polling centers. We come back to the question about preparedness for the elections, and I insist that the Independent National Electoral Commission had a lot of time to prepare for these elections. They had a lot of opportunities to test their technology, to test their preparedness, to stress test the websites. How can the websites where citizens can view the results of the elections crash on election day? It does not speak of proper preparation. It does not speak of troubleshooting. It doesn't even speak to, thinking ahead and what if this happens, what if that happens? Where is the scenario planning? Where is the project planning? And we come back to this thing about trust. I believe that in a democracy, Elections are an opportunity for citizens to give feedback to their elected officials to say, you have done well, we want you to continue, or you haven't done well, we want you to leave. Or we see prospects in this person, we want them in, or we don't see prospects in this person and we don't want them in. The thing that guarantees the integrity of the process is the Independent National Electoral Commission. And I must say that from what we've seen yesterday, the fact that elections are still going on in so many places today because of failures from INEC speaks to the overall failure of the Independent National Electoral Commission in the 2023 elections.
I make mention of the isolated incidents of violence in reference to a conversation I had with another person who is reporting in Nigeria, saying, or perhaps almost giving the impression that those incidents are being over-reported and perhaps put on a platform and not as serious as they've been made out to be. So I'm checking with you there just to get an idea of the reality on the ground. Or could this be an instance that perhaps they want to give the impression that elections are peaceful without those isolated incidents being as serious as you're telling me?
So I think something else to mention is I've monitored elections in Nigeria since 2011. That's at least 4 cycles. So 2011, 2015, 2019, and this election 2023. And one thing, unfortunately, that's kind of synonymous with elections in Nigeria is that you will have pockets of violence in some areas. Sometimes they'll be in urban areas. Sometimes they will be in, the rural areas. They'll be in places where it is hard to report. Unfortunately, one of the things that politicians haven't really accounted for the 2023 elections is the penetration of digital in the country, is the penetration of mobile devices. It is also the demographic of people who are voting. If you look at the numbers, the statistics of people, you mentioned, very correctly earlier, over 90 million people are registered for the election. People with collected PVCs is over 87 million. Now, of that number, 37% are young people. First-time voters, people in their 20s, people just getting up to 30s, and people who were part of, for instance, the NSARS movement, people who have seen the elections as an opportunity to speak and say the things that they wanted to say during NSARS that they weren't allowed to say. So I do not believe that, the elections have been, there are no absolutes here, but I do not believe that the elections have been peaceful to the extent that is being reported to give some sort of credibility to the elections, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
That's what I'm sticking with.
Okay, absolutely. So looking at some of the observations in the build-up to elections, we saw reports of customers stocking up on food and essentials, uncertain of the outcome of these elections. Just looking at the political climate and also looking at the observations you've made in the past, do you think that those who have been stocking up on essentials are perhaps, know something that, know the sort of outcome that is likely given the tone and the political climate of these specific elections?
That's a really good question. And we must first look at the fact that in the last month or in the last 2 to 3 months, Nigerians haven't had a lot of cash in their hands. I'm sure that you are aware that, Nigeria has recently redesigned its currency and the country is pushing its citizens to go cashless. However, I must speak on that as well and say that it's one of the most ill thought out, poorly organized, very inefficient processes, because the people who are suffering the most, as always, are the grassroots, are regular people like myself, people who do not have access to bank managers, etc. And the crazy thing is, leading up to election day, there were, political party members caught with millions of naira in cash. And you have to ask the question, I'm talking about the new notes, how are politicians able to access millions of naira in cash when the new rules for the new notes say people shouldn't have more than 20,000 naira in a week? Right? As individuals. So we come back to this thing about the preparedness for the elections. But to specifically answer your question about stocking up on food, I think that Nigeria needs to grow, and very urgently too, to a point where elections are not seen as a do or die affair. I think that it's really sad that we deploy the military for elections. I also think that it's doubly sad that the air is so tense and everyone's afraid and people are pretty much walking on eggshells and trying to stock up on food with money that they don't have. Yeah. In this instance, with cash that they don't have, because we're all expecting something really, really terrible to happen. The other thing is that these elections are pretty high stakes. Nigeria has seen 2 recessions under this present administration. We've been hit with insecurity, declining from Boko Haram on the one hand, yet escalating from banditry, from herdsmen, from all sorts of people, from IPOB. There's so many different pressure points, so many different points of aggression within within the country. And so for a lot of people, these elections are make or mar. These elections will determine how we live live our lives over the next 8 years. And so there is a bit of tension, but it's quite frankly, it's a shame. There's not a lot of countries where everything grinds to a halt the day before elections. In Nigeria on Friday, a lot of offices closed at noon. Some offices didn't open at all because people were just afraid, and it shouldn't be so. Yeah. This is where the government should tell us that they are ready. They are able to protect lives and property, but also they are able to put together a process that protects citizens. And not only protects them, but gives them something to be proud of and something that they can believe in. This government hasn't done that. And the Independent National Electoral Commission has definitely not done that.
Very well. Thank you so much. Thanks for your time. Thanks for giving us that broader picture. Chioma Agwuegbo, Executive Director at TechHerNG, speaking to the climate, the political climate in Nigeria as vote counting is underway.